And in many ways, this is the video that I've not looked forward to making, but I believe I need to make. Because this one's going to be deeply personal, more personal than the others I've put out. Because in this video, I'm going to talk about my journey with depression. You know, I've encountered people who said they were depressed, and my response in my mind or out loud is sometimes I would tell them or think to myself they need to get over it, which is naive of me. And sometimes I think, well, they need to get over themselves, which is just stupid of me. Because it shows a complete misunderstanding of depression. Depression is a pervasive problem. It affects how you think, how you see the world, and thus how you interpret things. And so it affects how you make decisions and the relationships you have. And it's, you know, despite what the drug companies will tell you on the ads, it's a spiritual problem. The drugs and stuff and all that can help with the symptoms, but the cure, it's a spiritual problem. And it's a journey. It's not a, you know, take the spiritual pill and be fixed. It's a journey. And in my journey, mine's one of spiraling downward. As a kid, I struggled with low self-esteem. I didn't have a lot of confidence or much confidence in myself at all. Couldn't really tell you why. But I always felt like I was different because I always felt like I looked at the world differently, saw things differently, understood things differently than other people. And I remember a story about how my father was told by one of my teachers, there are those who, you know, march to the beat of the, you know, of the popular drum, whatever. There are those who march to the beat of their own drum. But he said, your son, he makes his own beat. Sounds cute. Sounds insightful, but I'm not sure what it means. I'm still not sure what it means, and it's been 30 plus years. I think I'm starting to get an understanding about it. Starting to understand what it means, because our son, who's autistic, as I watch him and learn about him and learn about myself as well as a result, I think I'm starting to understand through him about myself. And so I struggled as a kid with self-esteem. I didn't have a lot of friends. I had trouble making friends. I didn't know how. Didn't think I was capable of in many ways. Nobody would like me. As a teenager, didn't really improve. Ended up seeing a counselor. Didn't work. I learned how to play the counselor, give him the answers he wanted. And when I quit playing his game, he got mad. But I had trouble making friends as a teenager, and it hurt even more. And the spiral continued. The real spiral began really in 2014, and the real decline in 2014. But before that, in my life, I had a bunch of jobs, and none of them really long-term. And I don't know why, I just didn't keep a job very long. We kept moving from coast to coast. But I struggled with that. And then around 2013, 2014, I started to really look at my life. And 2014 is when I really, like I said, hit the spiral and a rapid decline. The longest job I'd have, if you call it one job, was pastoring for 10 years, but that was in 3 different churches in 2 different states. And as I looked at my life, all I saw was failure after failure after failure after failure after failure. And as I started looking at that in 2013 and especially 2014, I started to really spiral downward. 2014 is when I left the church in Florida and we moved back to Texas. I didn't have a job, so we moved in with my mother and father, and I hated that. And I started trying to find jobs, both in church and out of church, and was hearing a lot of the same things, either overqualified or underqualified. I got a few things here and there, but nothing really stuck. Nothing really stuck. And it was hard. I looked at my life and I saw failure after failure, and I had every evidence to support that conclusion. And I just really went downhill, and my perspective really became really skewed by depression. And I didn't see a way out. Everything I tried turned to dust. And during that time, from 14 to 18, I finally did get a part-time job, but that's only because I had experience in that company. Otherwise, the boss told me that otherwise I wouldn't have gotten it because of the PhD. I came to a conclusion that my PhD was a problem, but I couldn't hide it. And I started to kind of regret getting it because it was keeping me from getting a job. And I felt like I'd failed there too. So I finally got a part-time job, and while I was there, my coworkers saw me starting to really spiral downhill, and other things came at me, and things weren't going right. It was while we were living in my mother and father's house that we discovered that our son is autistic, and even to this day, I still blame myself. I know I shouldn't, but I still blame myself, and I just saw that as just one more failure in a life of failure. Throughout my life, I'd always heard variations on how I misunderstood, how I had the problem, all passive ways of blaming me, and somehow I was the problem, I thought. And then I had this life of failure. And it was at the same time, in that same 14 to 18, 2014 to 2018 time frame, that not only do we learn our son-in-law is autistic, not only did I fail to provide for the family and be a success, which I defined as paying the bills and having a little left over for savings, I couldn't do that. It was during that same time that I was badly hurt by others. I was told outright I was a failure. I had no self-esteem, believed myself to be a failure. And just a word of advice: if someone has no self-esteem, doesn't see themselves in any positive light, and is struggling with that, the last thing you do is reinforce their negativity. The last thing you do is reinforce that, yeah, they are a failure. I was also told that I'd wasted 11 years of my life that was getting my entire seminary education. I was told that was a waste. And so what I was told is I'm a failure who wasted his life. That didn't help. Also found out that people were spreading falsehoods about me. People were telling others, John's mad at God. I wasn't mad at God. Of course, they wouldn't come to me about it. They just told others John's mad at God, which is untrue. I never blamed him. I didn't understand him. I didn't, have answers. I was very frustrated and mad at myself, but I wasn't mad at God. I didn't blame him. It's not his fault. I was always confident he was doing what is right, even if I didn't understand it. And it may have irritated me beyond anything that I didn't have answers. But I wasn't mad at God and blaming him. I kept going to him for help. And the depression wouldn't let me see the help he was offering. But then finally help did come. Some of my coworkers had gone to the manager at the store and noticed that I had really gone downhill and wanted her to challenge me and help me. And so she did. She challenged me to seek the help of someone. It didn't have to be a professional, but just someone. And so I did. And, James is the one I went to. He's not a counselor. He's not some trained professional. He's just an average guy like me who has got a family, and he loves Jesus. He was the only person I could think of I could go to. So I went to him. And James, if you're watching, I can't tell you how grateful I am for you. And there's a longer story about how James and I came to meet. It's kind of interesting, but it's a 20-year plus journey for that too. But anyway, he helped me, and he first encouraged me to watch a sermon, and I did. And in the sermon, and I don't want to mention the names of these people other than James, but I don't want to mention the pastors or churches' names because it's not about them. I want this to be emphasis to be on God, what God did, God's help. He had me watch a sermon by this pastor, and the sermon reached me. It was how I thought, it was how I felt, and it provided answers. God used this sermon by this preacher to give me answers, but not all of them. I also began taking the steps, after getting some advice, taking the steps of doing something I don't normally do, or at least hadn't normally done. I saw the world negatively. I saw failure. I saw no hope, and everything's going to fall apart. And so I started telling myself almost every day, out loud telling myself, something good's going to happen today. Even if I didn't believe it, I would still tell myself that. And I also began reading the Bible every day, or nearly every day, I should say. I use YouVersion for that, and I'll read multiple passages, not just the one verse it gives us, but I'll read multiple verses, and I would ask God to help me, to show me, to teach me. And I began writing down my thoughts on Google Docs, and writing down my thoughts for each passage. I don't want to consider it journaling because I don't like that term, but I guess it is. But I started doing that, and those actually are what I use for the YouTube devotionals that I make. They're part of my journey. But what stands out to me is, as we were talking, as James and I were talking at a Starbucks one day, we're talking about being at the table with God, and Satan's there, and how I need to listen to God. Well, James and I are talking back and forth, and then we both just simply stopped for a moment, took a drink I had tea and he had coffee. I don't like coffee. But James looked up at the speaker and said, "Oh, I didn't notice that," talking about the background music. He asked me if I had heard it. I looked up and I hadn't heard it before either. It was playing the entire time, but we hadn't heard it. And then it's like God set off a light bulb in James's mind. And James said, that's exactly what it is. He said, that's the key. He said, you probably heard people, and I told him I heard people say, silence Satan. He said, don't try to silence Satan. He's going to talk. He's going to keep talking. You need to focus on God's voice. And as you focus on God's voice, Satan's voice will still be there, but you won't be hearing it. Just like you and I heard each other, and we were listening to each other, so we didn't hear the music, although it was still there. He said we didn't hear the music until we stopped listening to each other. He said when you stop listening to God, Satan's voice will come in. So listen to God. That touched me, and that was kind of the point of the sermon, and that became my life verse, and I have it hanging on my office wall, and this is it right here. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Psalm 23:5. That's become my life verse. But from a life of being told, John, what's your problem? John, don't, stop being that way. John, you're the pessimist. John, you're the issue. And essentially, John, you're to blame. John, you misunderstood. You're to blame. To careers and jobs that didn't work out, to, children and, not being perfect, I guess, in medically, having autism. He is perfect the way he is. But the perspective was failure. I'm to blame. And I got to a point where everything I saw was negative. And then having people reinforce that and spread rumors and not talk to me, it all fed into this perspective of I'm a failure, and fed into the low self-esteem, which I'd struggled with all my life. But God used not family, but outsiders to help me. I finally got a job at where I'm at now, and the journey here, throughout the entire process of the interview process, I kept telling Olivia, I won't get the job, I won't get the job, they won't hire me, they won't hire me, it won't work out, it's gonna fail. Well, I got the job. But the journey to get here, God gave us evidence after evidence after evidence that it was the right thing to do, that He was planning it. And then it turned out that my supervisor, my boss, she's able to relate to me. And James was certain that God would put someone here that would be able to help me. We had no idea who it would be or when they would show up, but it turned out, and it wasn't planned this way, but she's able to help me because she can relate to me in a way that others can't. And it's like God said, I'm going to put her there to help you and challenge you and encourage you and teach you. And I'm wanting God to teach me the lessons that are the right ones, not the wrong ones I learned in my life. I'm wanting Him to change my perspective, but it's a spiritual journey. And I hope that this video, I hope that God uses this video maybe to help you. Maybe you're suffering with depression. I'm not going to promise a cure. I don't feel cured. I still struggle every day. And there are times, there are days that are worse than others. There are days that are downright hard. But I still continue on the steps. I still try to do what I need to do to seek God. I still tell myself something good's going to happen today. I still read the Bible and ask God to show me something. I still write down my thoughts on the computer. And God's helping me. I'm not cured. I will probably suffer with this my entire life, but I'm getting better because of God. So I hope this helps you. And I hope this encourages you. And hopefully you know that you're not alone. And it doesn't have to stay the way it is. God bless.